In this video, we're gonna keep on with our assembling our jacket. We're gonna make some bias tape and put together a hood and all kinds of other stuff. So let's get into it. Hey guys, it's Elizabeth from ElizabethMavis.com, and today I'm bringing you day 3 of my quilted jackets series here that I'm doing. I've been talking about this coat that I made, but I didn't want to walk you through the whole process of doing this because this was a really giant project. But I wanted to show you how I did the quilting on my jacket, but on a smaller scale. So the first day we talked about some different patterns that you might consider for doing a project like this, and yesterday we marked things up for the fronts and the backs, and today I'm gonna show you how to cut some bias. There's bias that covers the inside seams and everything to make everything nice and pretty. And what else am I gonna do? Oh, I'm gonna show you how to finish the pockets. I quilted the pockets as well, and also how to mark the hood pieces that you have. And yeah, just to sew the seams. We're gonna sew the seams and do all the inside work. That's it. So let's get into that, and I will meet you in the next clip. Alright, there's several things I need to show you for this next step. So now I've got my pocket, and now I still have this hole that I've got to close up. Because I'm going to quilt this pocket, I am not just going to top stitch around this, because we're gonna actually top stitch this like to the actual vest itself. So instead, I'm going to grab some of this steam-a-seam, and this is one of my favorite things to use in the sewing room. It's a double-sided tape, and you stick it down just to glue anything in place that you need to, just kind of temporarily. But what's wonderful about it is that it acts as a stabilizer, but it presses to anything. So basically, I'm gonna hit my iron with that, and then I'll peel off the backing, and then just glue that down in place. So I've already done that on this one. You can see like there's the holes closed up. All I have to do is top stitch around that on top of my vest. But first, before I do that, I need to line up where my pocket's going to be. So that's where my pocket marking is, and you can see I've already marked where the quilting lines are going to be, just based on where it's intersecting all the lines there. So I'm going to go ahead and quilt this piece, and then I'll come back and I'll top stitch around that just to finish off this part of the thing. And I'll do that and I'll go ahead and add my markings in the same way on this pattern on the other side of my front. Just continuing those lines with my marker and doing that. Okay, but the other thing is that you can see I've already started I sewed the first side seam, and because we took that extra time, see now those horizontal lines are all nice and neat and lined up, which is great. So now what we need to do is finish off these seams, and to do that we need to have some bias tape. So you can use packaged bias tape, but I think it's always nicer to just make it from whatever it is that you happen to be using. So I cut strips of bias from my actual yardage. So I've got my selvage here, and then I took my ruler and set it at the 45-degree line, and then just made markings along there. So this tape is cut at 1.25 inches wide, and then I just pressed it straight down the middle. Now you could put it through one of those double fold things, which will do it like that, and that's what you get when you buy packaged bias tape. The problem with that is that there's a ton of bulk on this, and so if I fold it together just once like this, it's going to be less bulk than if I have another fold here, another fold here, another fold there, and then I'm gonna go and stitch it down. Like that's 2 extra layers of bulk that I don't need. So once you have all of your bias tape, then you're going to sew it to one side, and I'm going to sew it I'm going to sew this on top of the the front side of the seam. And I'm just going to sew the bias tape with a 1/4 inch seam allowance right along there. And then when that's finished, I'm going to press the whole thing back over itself and top stitch it down. It's gonna just finish off that seam really nicely. It will add a little bit of top stitching on the front side, but honestly, you have all this top stitching. Are you really gonna bother about it if you have a little extra top stitching? And I'm gonna do that for all the interior seams, which is gonna be this side seam, the shoulder seam, that shoulder seam, and also that side seam when we get it done. I also want to cut some wider bias, and this I cut at 2.5 inches wide, and I'm just gonna make longer strips of this by just joining them together, so I can have, you know, longer continuous pieces of that. But this is what we're gonna use to trim around the front edge of where the zipper is going to be, and also the hem and the armholes too. And I'm cutting it wider because I don't want to fold this back on itself, because that's too much bulk. So I only want to be putting the bias tape so that it's going to fold around on itself. So if it's any narrower than that, it's going to be really hard to work with. So 2.5 inches, and just cut, I mean, several strips of that, as much as you can. There's a cool way to cut bias so that it's continuous and there's no extra. You can just cut it in one strip, but in this case I don't need a lot, and also I don't have a lot of fabric enough to make bias in that way, so I will save that for another video. The last thing I want to show you is in this clip is the hood. So you can see I've started to mark my lines for my quilting for the hood, but the hood has a little bit of a dart in it for shaping. So before I mark my lines, I'm going to sew this dart out. So I'm just putting a pin through the other side, and then I put a pin through the two legs of the dart, and I just sew that there, and I'm just gonna fold that down, and then I'm just gonna press it. I'm gonna press my dart down one side with my hands. You can't really press Finsel it too well, so I'm gonna top stitch my dart down. I mean, again, you have so many different top stitching lines with your quilting, so I think top stitching the dart down is a nice way to kind of flatten things out, but also just I don't think you're not gonna really be bothered by those extra lines there. The alternative way to do this is to do your lining separately and sew out the dart, and then do like the Thinsulate and the top bit together, cut out the bulk, and then match the dart. But actually, this way I think is a little bit simpler, even if it's not as clean as if you had, you know, sewed out the dart separately. But certainly this is a lot simpler way to do that. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to keep on marking my lines and just quilt the hood the same way that I quilted all the other pieces. So I will show you in the next clip. Okay, so now you can see I've done all of my quilting on my pocket. The one thing to note about the pocket is that because we're not going in a continuous stream, I had you want to back stitch along the edges of the pocket on each of your lines. Okay, so when you get that done, then just pin your pocket in place, and then you're just gonna stitch all the way around the pocket so that it's affixed to your front, and then backstitch there and backstitch there, just like I did on this pocket. So now this pocket is totally done, and I'm just going to do the same thing with that one. The last thing that we have to mark is the hood. So I did all of the quilting on this first side of the hood, and like I told you, like you can't even tell that there's a dart there, even though, you know, we top stitched the dart down so that it would be nice and flat on the inside of the hood. So I'm going to take this side of my hood, and I'm going to get that thread off there. I'm going to take my hood, and I'm going to put it face down, right sides together with the other side of the hood, and I'm just going to make sure that those lines are going to be in the same spot, and that is just so that I don't have to worry about matching this seam quite so hard. If I just kind of went off of my original line, it'd be really easy to get off. But if I'm matching these lines as they're on the hood right now, it's going to be so much easier to just keep my lines nice and consistent when I go to just add all the quilting on this side. So this is I'm just marking the horizontal lines with my marker. So I'm just kind of lifting this up just a little bit so I can see, okay, that's where my line is. I'm just going to give it a little mark. Same thing for all of these. So now I've got all those marks, and those are all my horizontals. So I already have my first one, which was actually a little tiny bit off on the back side. So I'm just going to fix that. And again, I got cute and I added vertical lines, which shouldn't be there. So don't pay attention. Pay no attention to the vertical lines, which shouldn't be there. That kind of help a little because they kind of act like my green lines. Last line there, and so now I'm gonna add my other line. So I've got to do the 60 degrees. That's enough to get it started. So I just matched up one of those. And we could get really, really technical and like making sure that every last line was like super, super perfect. But we'll just get, you know, as best we can. I think that if the hood seam is right, then we'll be doing good. And all of my lines again are 1.5 inches apart. And that is just gonna make it nice and simple. And I think it's a good scale for the size that I'm working at. For my big coat, my lines were all 2 inches apart, which I think was a good scale for the size of the coat that I was working on there. But, you know, you can do bigger, smaller apart, or closer together. Closer together or further apart. It just kind of depends on what kind of look you're going for and how quilted you want your project to be. Oh, I can hardly see this. Alright, and then I'm just going to connect those where the crosses are coming together, where the parallelogram points are coming together. And that's going to make my lines for my triangles. And I am just going to quilt this the same way that I've quilted all the other pieces. So we're just stitching along every single line with a 3.5 inch straight stitch length, and then when it's all done, then we'll just cut around the pattern piece to get rid of the extra thinsulate and the extra lining fabric. Okay. There we go. Couple more. So now I'm going to sew my other side seam, and then we'll get to going on getting the shoulder seams. So I'm just going to match my quilting lines for the horizontal, I should say, the horizontal quilting lines. And I'm only giving myself a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. I think that's really good because then you don't have to trim it down later. So if you're using a pattern that's got, you know, smaller seam allowances or bigger seam allowances than that, feel free to, you know, to trim them off your pattern. It's just fine. Okay, and I'm going to gonna go ahead and sew my shoulder seams too now. So again, I'm using 3/8 inch seam allowance, but if you have a pattern with a 5/8, that's fine. You're just gonna trim it down in the next step here. I'm just gonna go around. I'll do my next one, and I already sewed the first side seam here. So internally, we've got our vest now. You can see it's starting to take shape here. Now you can serge the inside seam allowances so it's nice and clean, but it's really, your serger is not going to like you because you've just got a lot of thickness here. You've got 1, 2, 3 layers on one side of the seam and 1, 2, 3 on the other side of the seam. So the serger is just going to have a hard time. So even though we're going to add more bulk by adding the bias tape, it's ultimately just going to look really, really nice. So I've got my 1 1/4 inch bias tape that I've cut, and again, I apologize for my hands. They're just covered with marker right now, but that's okay. I will wash them later. And I'm just going to sew this to the top side of my seam, which is the front side, to the front. And I'm just going to sew it with like a 1/4 inch seam allowance, just top to bottom. And now I'm going to fold this, I'm going to open this up, and I'm going to wrap the bias tape towards the back so that it totally covers over that seam completely. And then I'm just going to top stitch it down. So actually the free edge, when you do it like this, that free edge is not covering anything else. So even though we've got more bulk like on top of the seam, we're not adding any more bulk right here. And it's just going to make a really, really nice clean seam on the inside. You won't even be able to see that there's a seam there, which is kind of nice. So this is kind of a variation of a Hong Kong finish, but it's just kind of adapted for the fact that we've just got these really, really bulky fabrics here. Just I'm top stitching really close to the edge of my bias tape. And you certainly could do this with package binding too. If you use the package binding, I would suggest opening it up totally and pressing it flat, and then pressing it just so there's only one fold there, so you don't have that extra bulk. Okay. It's kind of hard to get in there sometimes. So I'm just going to cut my thread, and then I'm just going to do that for all the rest of my seams. So this shoulder seam, this shoulder seam, and then that seam as well. And then that finishes up all of the insides of the vest. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends. Thanks for watching. Happy sewing. In this video, and pay no attention to the vertical lines, which shouldn't be there. Don't forget to subscribe and share it with your friends.